America reveres its sports, but do the games we play and watch so enthusiastically have an ugly undercurrent? There are many who say racism has not only been a long-time problem in sports, but that it is increasing in incidence. Today we talk about what's happening, why, and what we might be able to do about it. But first, we have this perspective from Christy Duffy.
Sport and media, two of the most powerful cultural forces in America. When discussing the issue of race, sport comes into play because the complex themes of our culture are embedded in it.
The issue of race becomes important because of the inequities that we have with African American athletes. Why do we have so many African American athletes at the elite level and yet so few managers, so few general managers, so few coaches, so few owners? Why are they not in the managerial ranks? Why are they not in the administration of sports industry?
Dr. Amy Bass, author of Not the Triumph but the Struggle, says African American players' dominance of the field but absence from ownership is an ongoing problem, along with how fans and media have reacted to athletes along racial lines. William Roden, sports columnist for the New York Times, authored $40 Million Slaves.
The book was originally designed to be a call to arms to African American athletes, to unify, to come together as a group to exert muscle and power in an industry that they dominate on the field, but really had no collective power.
And then there's the issue of how the media covers these athletes. The media, too, is segregated. Most sports desks or press boxes are predominantly white. Another sports journalist and author, Bethlehem Scholes, agrees the media has shown its biases.
I think the media wants to pretend that the questions of race aren't somehow at stake or at issue when they're talking about sports. They're just using very different language to talk about players of different ethnic backgrounds.
Finding the words to deal with the issue of race in sports begins with knowledge.
In general, I think Americans don't have a very good language to deal with it. Americans have a big problem with race in terms of how to articulate it, how to talk about it, and how to think about it.
Reporting for Fresh Outlook, I'm Christy Duffy.
Let's introduce our guest for today. I have with me Dr. David Wiggins, who's a professor and the director of the School of Recreation, Health, and Tourism at George Mason University, and he's also the author of numerous books on racial issues in sports. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here.
And Thabiti Lewis is also a guest of ours. He is an associate professor at the Washington State University's English department, and he is an author in his own right, and we thank you as well for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, now the story we just watched said that black athletes have very little ownership in the sports that they actually play. Do you agree that that's the case, and why would that present a problem?
Well, they certainly don't run the games that they play. They aren't in ownership positions, and primarily in, say, professional football, you don't have as many African-American coaches or owners. That has changed a bit. There are some that have made it into those ranks, but and in basketball there certainly has been a growing preponderance of coaches and some executives.
But why is it so important? I mean, what difference does it make what the color of the skin is of the owner or the manager or the coaches? I mean, does it really affect the game or the players individually in some way?
When you say it doesn't matter, the real question is, why is there not access to these particular positions of leadership and power? There's almost these conscious and if not unconscious notions of, well, you can be in the sweat zone but not in the sweat-free zone.
Well, Dave, let me ask you though, because it sounds to me more like a matter of business than anything else.
I think it's important to note that this has been taking place since the post-World War II era. When we had integration, it was a one-way street, in my opinion. We had athletes that were reintegrated into American sport. But athletes are really the least most powerful people in sport. The power really resides in owners, coaches, athletic directors, administrators.
Yeah, but you know, those of us who are sitting at home say, my gosh, these guys play a game for their living and they make a great living. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them make a great living. What is the big deal about being then in the upper echelon? You don't get to play. I mean, you know, what does that having that power mean to them?
Well, certainly longevity. certainly an impact on the ideological components that run the sport. Also, when you think about who's producing the PR, how does one culturally promote the product, and from what worldview are you gauging this? But beyond that, I think when you say, why does it matter? The response is, why is it an issue that there's this sort of glass ceiling that exists? Because you have so many athletes in football and basketball, for example, you would think after 5 decades, 6 decades, that there would be a greater amount of diversity, and women even for that matter, if you will.
I've got a question to follow up on that. We have to take a very quick break, but we're going to pick up on this right where we left off, and I'm going to come back to you, Dave. We hope you will come back and join us again. We'll be back here in just a moment. On today's Fresh Outlook, racism and sports. And Dave, I want to get right to my question to you, because we're talking about, black athletes having ownership of the sports in which they participate. But is this a matter of legitimately, blacks being shut out? Are there some forces at work that are keeping them from, or are they just not investing their money and trying to have these jobs?
No, I think it stems from my own personal views. It stems from white domination still. But do we have any documentation or proof that, yeah, absolutely, because so-and-so tried to take over the team and he was shut out because of the color of his skin? I don't have any specific examples to know, but it seems pretty obvious to me anyway that when you look at the percentages, that's exactly what the situation is. And again, it's a question of allowing African Americans to play those athletic positions, again, the least powerful positions within the context of sport. Certainly people have made efforts, African Americans have made efforts to find their way into the executive offices and the suites in the president's office, but have been shut down.
Let's take this back down to the level of youngsters who are going to get into sports. And Thabiti, we were talking a little bit before the show. You've written a book called Ballers of the New School, Race, Sport, and American Culture. Are young black Americans given a specific view of their place in sports beginning at some early age? We
live in a society that we get a lot of media images, and those iconic figures and the most popular sports happen to be football, basketball, and I think baseball still. But I think there are also economic issues that are very much a part of participation in particular types of sports. I mean, my daughters, for example, do sports that I never was involved in as a kid: ice skating, swimming. These things cost money. And then, of course, we can tie economics aren't absent from, racial dynamics back to my racial contract engagement regarding equity in different polities within our society. So that would be my quick response.
And Dave wants to add.
Well, I was going to say, I think the layperson, the people on the street, they take these selective media images and assume that African Americans dominate sport. Mm-hmm. It's simply not true. They're overrepresented in football and basketball, and an underrepresentation of African Americans in what I refer to as country club sports.
Right. Despite Tiger Woods.
In spite of Tiger Woods, in spite of Serena and Venus Williams, they're vastly underrepresented in tennis, mm-hmm. golf, lacrosse. I think people simply aren't allowed or don't have the economic means in which to participate in those activities.
I think you're right. I mean, if you read the stories of the Williams sisters, their father made a concerted effort to make sure that they would be involved in tennis. And, often there would be tennis courts where there's no net up. And, the equipment is not free. So there are these sort of class issues. And, you need access, mobility, and all those things deal with economics, which are, we can't ignore the racial impact regarding the inequities in the various polities that exist in our society.
I think Thabiti makes a good point. I think it's important for us not just to think about race, but we should also think about class.
Yeah. And they are interrelated.
Interrelated.
Yeah, inextricably. Let me take the conversation in another turn. We're dropping all these names: the Tiger Woods, the Williams sisters, Michael Jordan. Do you think athletes such as this, high-profile black athletes, are held to a different standard than are white athletes? You're smiling, so it seems like, oh yeah, I've been waiting.
I mean,
for
I think, no, I mean, that's without a doubt, certainly that is the case. So the outrage with Tiger Woods is as though this doesn't take place amongst golfers within this particular sport and in the clubhouses and the bars, et cetera. The scenarios with Michael Vick, for example, is blown completely to another decibel, if you will, that in comparison to, say, someone like Brett Favre or what is this Roethlisberger figure. Historically in American society, black men have been villainized, and I think black people function as this sort of villain figure. And so what's interesting and what's very sad is that sport really can function to be this sort of normalizing mechanism, but when you look at the media, the sports writers, who are 90% or 90 to 95% white males. 98% of the sports editors are white males. And so the question is, who's spinning these narratives? And there's an intense power to constantly tell average Joe, the guy that they, or the young lady that they are making some connections with, wait a minute, that's a villain. Maybe that can't be your hero, because heroes are people we want to emulate.
Dave, let me put it real bluntly. You're a white man who seems to really be focusing on this issue. A lot of your writings talk about the inequities and the way we treat blacks versus white athletes.
Absolutely.
Why? Why are you on this crusade, if you can call it that?
Not necessarily a crusade. I think in order to understand American history, in order to understand American culture, I think you have to deal with these issues. You have to talk about race, not just in the larger American culture.
But why do you focus on sports so much?
I'm fascinated by it. It has a real interest on the part of a lot of Americans. It's an institution that gathers a lot of attention, both media attention. People write about sport. I think sport tells us a lot about American society. And it's a perfect venue to examine racialist thinking. It's a perfect venue in which to really examine deep-seated stereotypical notions that exist in our culture based on race. I was thinking about the interesting way that sportscasters and sports writers portray black athletes, and one of the classic examples would be this: for a long period of time, African Americans were not allowed to play the quarterback position.
Yes.
And the argument is that they simply did not have the brains to play quarterback. They did not have the leadership skills. And now suddenly, with more African Americans playing that position, the position, in my view, the position of the description has changed. Now we're describing quarterbacks as being greater athletes.
I have to take a very short break. We're going to be right back. Obviously, there's so much more to be said on this subject. Please stay with us. Today on Fresh Outlook, we're talking about race and sports. Reporter Cherry Greg Mincy takes it to a personal level right now by talking with some young athletes to get their perspective on this issue.
Sports are a huge part of our culture. Whether it's basketball, baseball, soccer, or ping pong, Americans love the nail-biting suspense that every matchup creates. But sports also gives us clues about how society treats differences, especially racial differences. For Fresh Outlook, I decided to get to the bottom of it and ask some questions. And what better way to do that than to speak to the athletes themselves? I traveled to Newark, New Jersey, where I met with Rutgers basketball player Ralph Jones and baseballer Matt Connors. These guys play out of love for the game and winning.
The first thing that's on my mind is winning, doing what's necessary to win, because a failure is just not an option for me.
I absolutely love it. I can't picture myself doing anything else.
Number 23, Aldar Muhammad, is a Scarlet Raiders sophomore. His mom, Yolanda, comes to every game and tells her son to always do what he believes is right.
I just tell him to pray and keep God first.
She believes when it comes to making mistakes, black athletes are held to a higher standard by the media. She wants her son to avoid those pitfalls.
It's just that when we make mistakes, they emphasize on it more. That could be good, and it also could be bad, because if it's good and our young African-American males see that, it's okay, I'm not going to go that way because what happened to him. So that's good in that sense, but to just just keep beating them down. It's not right.
Another issue could be the stereotypes people have about athletes based on their race and ethnicity.
They see a kid from overseas, or they see a kid from the Dominican Republic, and they think he should be good because he's from there. But that's not necessarily the case. It's how hard you want to work. It shouldn't matter about race, but I think some people do look at that more than they should have.
Nowadays, when people are debating whether to pay Division I athletes, these Division III Scarlet Raiders don't even get partial scholarships for their hard work.
It's throughout the whole year that you work hard. You have summer league, you have preseason. You're basically working hard all year long.
You can't sleep in past a certain time because you just won't have time to finish it. Right now I'm taking 18 credits, which is 6 classes on top of workouts for baseball.
It should be like a job type thing because it takes a lot of your time and it's hard. It's really hard.
Despite all the hard work, these guys will keep on playing for the love of the game and the fans.
Go Scarlet Raiders!
Woo! Even though sports might be a reflection of the stereotypes that exist in society, they also have the potential to bring everyone together behind a common goal. For Fresh Outlook, I'm Cherry Greg Mincy.
We're going to go back and continue our conversation with our two guests now. And Thabiti, I know you wanted to chime in on the conversation Dave was having here with me about the quarterbacks and the way they used to be treated in pro football. Now, what was your perspective on that?
Although there are more, there's still a problem with how accessible that particular position is. And so although they speak about the physical abilities, what they're really saying is that that's code word for I don't think you're intelligent enough to play.
So what we're saying is black athletes have the bodies but not the brains.
Well, and this stereotype, this idea continues. I mean, I always laugh. I make the joke to people, if you listen to the commentators, you'd think that the Indianapolis Colts don't have a coach because their quarterback is running the team, doing everything. But the antithesis for black quarterbacks is that if he's doing well, the coach is really sort of has done a great job with him. Mike Vick right now with Philadelphia is a perfect example.
I mean, this discussion still takes place today. This notion that somehow African American athletes are more physically gifted to participate in athletics still exists. That they have innate physiological gifts that allows them to realize great athletic performances. But I think the flip side of that is they don't have the intelligence to participate, certainly in some positions. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's just part of the deep-seated stereotypical notions that still exist in American culture.
Which seems almost laughable when you're telling me that, and yet very pathetic at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Thabiti, there was a topic you wanted to talk about a little bit as to whether NCAA athletes should be paid beyond their scholarships.
This is a contentious issue, but I wholeheartedly believe that they should be paid because it is a job. And I was laughing this week, last week, as the Oregon State battle was taking place, and I read an article where the coach said that they were going to do 3-a-day practices. As a university professor near finals, I don't know what student has time for 3-a-day practices and preparation for games, but the money that's generated, it's unbelievable. And again, I've always argued, as I argue in my book, we live in a meritocracy and we believe in rewarding people for the work that they do. The colleges can't take a non-profit status and generate profit and decide that they're not going to compensate these kids. I mean, I argue in my own work about using models of different countries. I think there's South Africa has soccer teams that just represent the university, and if those players want to play, they can. Let's just call it what it is. And I'm very cynical, but I call them athlete students. And
I want to take this to that broader perspective when we come back. We do have to take another very short break, and we're going to wrap up our conversation in just a moment. Racism is a big issue in sports, not only in America, but globally. I'm talking with my two guests here today about what the situation is, at least with regard to this country. Do you think that we're on a path toward improving things? Are we making progress? Are there even any models anywhere that we could emulate?
I'm rather cynical about this and not very positive, quite frankly. I think what we have in sport and American culture is, for the lack of a better phrase, really, is a plantation system.
Do you really? You put it that strongly?
Absolutely. I believe that we still have a limited number of African American athletes, but in certain sports. And all of the power, all of the control lies in administrative coaching positions held predominantly by whites. And I would even go as far as to say you have a limited number of African American males who have even an opportunity to participate in sport. With the problems in urban culture, the deterioration of education in urban America, the number of African American males that have been incarcerated and find themselves in jail, my sense is you almost have a limited, even more limited number of African Americans that can even find their way into sport. So I'm not very optimistic.
Thabiti, can you throw any optimism in, or are you on the same page as Dave?
We have to have these sort of honest conversations about the fact that it is a problem, because dialogue is the first step. And often the tensions exist because people don't want to talk about the realities that are in place. I don't think the athletes are politicized in the same way in which a previous generation was, because there are these false notions of post-civil rights progress, because we see these iconic figures. And so, but the reality is that if we have these honest engagements, we can begin to move away from these sort of race-neutralized, race-neutral constructions of figures like Tiger and Jordan, and say, okay, I'm going to really take you as you are, and if you diversify the infrastructure, then the ideology and the perspectives change.
I'm not sure I see where all this is going to start. I mean, I can understand more dialogue between races and people and honesty and openness, but I still don't see how the structure from the top down is going to change unless somehow the black athletes themselves make something happen.
Well, I think Bill Rhoden has made the argument that individual African American athletes may not be able to do much.
Who can?
But I think as a collective, they probably can. I'd like to see more African American athletes speak out about larger racial issues. I'd like to see more African American athletes come together and talk about the racial discrimination that still exists, both within sport and the larger American culture. I think doing that, at least we might be able to make some progress and see some improvement in what's taking place within the institution.
Well, Dr. Dave Wiggins and Thabiti Lewis, I thank you both very much. I feel like there's still much to be said and certainly much to be done in this area, but thank you for your discussion today. You don't have to search long or hard to find plenty of examples of racial discrimination in sports through the years. And as we just said, it appears we still have plenty of work yet before us. But our goal here is always to give you another perspective, a new awareness, a fresh outlook. We look forward to seeing you here again next week.